It started on a quiet Thursday morning at Westbridge High, in a small town tucked between cornfields and old brick factories. The kind of day where the air felt heavy with boredom, where students counted seconds, not minutes, till the bell rang. Inside room 204, the faint squeak of chalk filled the air. The calculus teacher, Mr. Collins, stood at the front, tall, sharp-eyed, and famously impatient. He had a habit of cutting students off mid-sentence, his sarcasm slicing sharper than the equations he wrote. Most kids didn't hate him. They just tried to survive his class without becoming the target of his next joke. Numbers filled the board in messy loops and symbols, chain rules, derivatives, and endless variables. The smell of stale markers and pencil shavings hung heavy. A few students fought to stay awake, their eyes flicking between the clock and their phones hidden under the desks. Then, something unexpected happened. A faint sound, the squeak of a mop bucket rolling past the open classroom door. It was the janitor moving slowly, rhythmically down the hall like he always did. His name was Marcus Reed. He was quiet, polite, always early, always unseen. To most of the students, he was just the guy with the mop. Mr. Collins paused mid-sentence and looked toward the door with a smirk. Well, he said loud enough for the class to hear. Look who's here. Hey, Marcus, think you can solve this one? A ripple of laughter spread through the room. Not loud, but sharp enough to sting. Marcus froze in the doorway, the mop still in his hand. His green work uniform was faded, his shoes damp from the freshly mopped floor. He looked at the board, long equation, complicated, messy. Then he looked back at Mr. Collins. The teacher raised a brow, the smirk deepening. Come on, he said, tapping the marker against the board. Show us what you've got. No one expected Marcus to respond. He wasn't supposed to. He was supposed to laugh it off, shake his head, and keep walking. But instead, Marcus stepped inside, slowly, calmly. He leaned the mop against the wall and walked up to the board. You mind? He asked quietly. A few students exchanged looks. Some started recording on their phones, thinking they were about to catch something funny. Mr. Collins handed him the marker with a grin that said, "This'll be good. Be my guest." The room fell silent. Marcus stood there, staring at the equation. He didn't look nervous, just thoughtful. His brow furrowed slightly as if he were reading something written in a language he hadn't seen in years but somehow still understood. Then he began to write. No hesitation. No show. Just calm, deliberate movement. Each stroke of the marker was steady, clear, precise. The classroom, once restless, had frozen. Even the hum of the overhead lights seemed louder. Mr. Collins folded his arms, still trying to look amused. But there was a flicker in his eyes now. Marcus spoke softly as he worked. This one's a chain rule problem, he said. But the trick's in spotting the inside function first. Once you do that, it simplifies everything. He moved like a man who'd done this 1,000 times before. Not just solving, teaching. Step by step, line by line, the kids leaned forward. One boy in the back whispered, "Wait, he actually knows this?" A minute later, the equation was done. Neat, balanced, perfectly solved. Marcus capped the marker and turned around. That's one way to do it, he said simply. The room stayed silent. No jokes now, just wide eyes. One student murmured, "He got it right." Even Mr. Collins said nothing. For a few long seconds, no one breathed. Marcus nodded once, picked up his mop, and headed for the door. No swagger, no smile, just quiet grace. As he left, a whisper broke the silence. "Wait!" He did that in his head, heads turned, eyes darted between the board and the man walking down the hall. It wasn't just the right answer, right? It was how effortlessly he'd done it. Like it wasn't even a challenge. Mr. Collins' smirk was gone. His face had hardened, caught between disbelief and embarrassment. Marcus looked back once. "I used to spend a lot of time with numbers," he said. "They just never left me." And then he was gone, just the quiet squeak of his shoes fading down the hall. But something had shifted in that classroom. Something big. It wasn't just the sound of chalk or laughter anymore. It was the sound of realization. They'd all just seen something they couldn't unsee. By the time the bell rang, everyone was still talking about what they'd just seen. Marcus Reed, the janitor everyone barely noticed, had just outsmarted the calculus teacher. At first, it spread like a whisper in the hallways. "Did you see what happened in Colin's class?" "Nah, what?" The janitor solved that crazy math problem, like in seconds. It sounded like a joke, the kind you laugh off. But by lunchtime, that whisper had turned into noise. Students were huddled in groups, phones out, screens glowing. Someone had caught it all on camera. The video wasn't fancy. Just a shaky shot from a phone held low behind a backpack. You could see Marcus standing at the board, his voice calm and even. And then that moment when Mr. Collins realized he wasn't just right. He was better. The caption read, "Our janitor just schooled the math teacher." By the end of the day, it was everywhere: TikTok, Instagram, group chats. Even the teachers were whispering in the staff room. "Are you serious? He did that in his head?" said Ms. Lewis, the physics teacher, her sandwich forgotten mid-bite. "I heard he didn't even pause," another replied. "Just solved it clean like it was muscle memory." At the corner table, Mr. Collins sat quietly grading papers, though his pen hadn't moved for a while. He pretended not to listen, but his jaw tightened every time he heard Marcus's name. Across the room, Principal Harris leaned forward. "How long's he been with us?" he asked. 7 years, I think," someone said. "And nobody knew he had an academic background?" Heads shook. Nobody did. Marcus came early, left late. Never spoke much. The floors were spotless. The lights always worked. He was there, yet invisible. Until now. That afternoon, a few students waited outside the janitor's closet. Not to complain about a broken locker, not to ask for supplies. They just wanted to talk to him. When Marcus appeared, carrying a bucket of rags, a small kid and maybe 12, stepped forward, clutching a geometry book. "Mr. Reed," the boy said nervously, "do you tutor?" Marcus blinked, surprised. "I haven't in a long time," he replied. "You should," the kid said with a shy grin. "You made that teacher look like a rookie." A few kids laughed, but not meanly this time. It felt different. Lighter. Marcus smiled, a faint, quiet smile that reached his eyes. The next day, when the fourth period bell rang, the mood in Mr. Collins's class had shifted too. He didn't crack jokes anymore, didn't call on random students. His voice was calm, almost restrained, like he was still trying to process what happened. After class, one of the students, Noah, approached him. "Mr. Collins," he said, "that problem Marcus solved yesterday. He used the same chain rule method you showed us, right?" Collins nodded once. "Correct." "Only," Noah added quietly. He explained it better. Collins didn't respond. He just closed his textbook and turned to erase the board, though his hand paused mid-motion. Meanwhile, across the school, Marcus carried on like nothing had changed. He fixed the squeaky faucet in the boys' locker room, restocked paper towels, cleared the cafeteria tables, but he could feel it. The stares, the whispers, the curiosity. Students looked at him differently now, some with respect, some with wonder, and some with guilt, maybe, for never having noticed him before. That evening, Principal Harris stopped him in the hallway. "Marcus, got a minute?" He led him to the front office. Marcus sat, cap in hand, uniform still damp from work. "I have to ask," Harris said gently, "do you have a background in math? Or teaching?" Marcus hesitated. His eyes dropped to the floor. "I went to university once," he said softly. "State University. Engineering major. Full scholarship." The principal raised his brows. "Really?" "Yeah, I was doing well. But my mother got sick. Cancer." He paused, the words catching slightly. "I took time off to take care of her. 1 semester turned into 2, and when she passed, there wasn't much left. No money, no home, no time to go back." Harris leaned back, silent. Marcus continued, voice low. "I picked up jobs where I could. Warehouses, grocery stores, eventually janitorial work. It was supposed to be temporary." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carries both pride and pain. But life doesn't always wait for your plans. That night, Marcus went home to his small apartment, quiet, modest, neat. He opened a worn cardboard box under his bed. Inside were a few papers, his old transcripts, a cracked calculator, and a photo of him and his mother on orientation day. He hadn't touched them in years. He sat on the edge of the bed, the photo in his hand, the memories flooding back, the lectures, the smell of campus coffee, the late nights solving equations that felt like art. He whispered to himself, "Guess those numbers really never left." Outside, the world moved on. Inside, something had started to wake up in him again, a piece of the man he used to be. But Marcus didn't know that what had happened in that classroom was only the beginning. The moment that seemed small, almost accidental, was about to change not just his life, but the entire school forever. By Monday morning, the video had spread beyond Westbridge High. It was no longer just a local rumor. It was everywhere. Someone had reposted it on a student forum with the caption, "When your janitor solves a calculus problem faster than your teacher." Then came the comments. Thousands of them. Bro broke the internet with a marker. Give this man a classroom, not a mop. Proof you never know someone's story. The clip hit regional news pages, then educational forums. By the weekend, it had millions of views. Marcus Reed had no idea. He didn't even own a smartphone, just an old flip phone that could barely text. That morning, while the internet was buzzing, Marcus was fixing a paper towel dispenser that had jammed again in the girls' restroom. To him, it was just another Monday. But around him, the school didn't feel the same. Teachers paused when he walked by. Students nodded at him in the halls, smiling like they'd just spotted a celebrity. Some whispered his name, others simply said, "Good morning, Mr. Reed." He wasn't used to being seen, and it made him uneasy. At lunch, a small group of students waited outside the janitor's closet again. This time they weren't shy. "Mr. Reed, can you help us with a math problem?" one girl asked. She held out a calculus book, corners bent, pages full of notes. Marcus blinked. "I can try," he said, setting down his mop. They sat right there in the hallway on the cold tile floor, surrounded by lockers and the smell of cleaning supplies. Marcus leaned over their notebooks, walking them through each step. No lectures, no big words, just calm, simple teaching. "See, the trick isn't memorizing," he said softly. "It's understanding why the numbers move the way they do." The students nodded, eyes wide, hanging on every word. By the time they finished, they understood it, really understood it. Someone filmed that moment, too. That afternoon, Principal Harris got a call from the local school board. "Yes, that's correct," he said over the phone, glancing through his office window at Marcus still helping the kids. "He's a custodian here." 6 years now, he paused. "No, he's not faculty, but yes, he's clearly teaching." Meanwhile, in the teacher's lounge, Mr. Collins was scrolling through his email when he saw it. A message from a parent. No subject line. No comment. Just a link to the viral video and the words, "Thought you'd want to see this." He clicked it, watched the first 10 seconds, then closed his laptop without a word. That same afternoon, Principal Harris called Marcus into the office again. "Marcus," he said, "the school board has been watching what's happening. They're impressed. They'd like to know if you'd consider running an after-school tutoring program. Just a small group, voluntary." Marcus looked stunned. "You want me to teach?" "Not as a teacher," Harris said carefully. "Just as a mentor. We'll pay you for your time. Nothing fancy, just share what you know." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I haven't taught in years," he said finally. Harris smiled. "You haven't forgotten how." That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table. He pulled out the old cardboard box again, the one filled with his past. The degree he never finished, the yellowed transcripts, the photo of his mother smiling on his first day at college. He laid them all out carefully. The paper was worn, the ink faded, but the story was still there. Every number, every dream. He stared at them for a long time, and for the first time in years, he felt something rising in his chest. Not regret, not pain, something else, hope. He didn't care about fame. He didn't even know he had any. What mattered was that a few kids wanted to learn, and they'd come to him to do it. By the next week, a quiet change had begun. Students started calling it Reed's Corner. Every Tuesday and Thursday, after the final bell, a group gathered in the library. They sat around the big oak table, notebooks open, pencils ready, and Marcus sat with them. Not in front of them like a teacher, but beside them, as if they were all learning together. He explained slowly, patiently, the way he wished someone had taught him when he was young. The students listened like their futures depended on it, but not everyone liked it. Mr. Collins had grown silent since the video went viral. He no longer joked in class. He spoke in short sentences and avoided eye contact when Marcus passed by. Other teachers noticed. Some pitied him, Others quietly admired Marcus but didn't know how to say it out loud. Still, the change was happening. Unstoppable and undeniable. The students were learning more than math. They were learning that brilliance could come from anywhere. That respect didn't come from titles, but from truth. And Marcus Reed, the man they once ignored, was slowly becoming the heart of the school. But with attention came resistance. And not everyone outside the school was ready to see a janitor change what people thought they knew about education. Something was coming. A new challenge that would test not just Marcus's patience, but his purpose. Within 2 weeks, Reed's Corner had become the most talked about thing at Westbridge High. Every Tuesday and Thursday after the final bell, students crowded into the library. Some sat on the floor, others leaned against the bookshelves, notebooks open, pencils ready, and there was Marcus, the same calm man in his green uniform, walking them through calculus like it was storytelling. He didn't just solve problems, he made numbers feel alive. When he spoke, his words carried patience, warmth, and a quiet authority that no classroom bell could command. He never raised his voice, never tried to impress anyone, but every explanation landed like a light switching on inside the room. Even teachers began stopping by. Ms. Lewis from physics sat in once and whispered afterward, "You've got a gift, Marcus." And not just with equations, he smiled politely. "Just doing what I can." But not everyone saw it that way. Behind the polite smiles in the teacher's lounge, tension was growing. Some teachers whispered that the lines were blurring, that a janitor running study sessions didn't look professional. And Mr. Collins? He had gone almost completely silent. He avoided Marcus in the hallways. When someone brought up the tutoring sessions, he'd changed the subject. His laughter was gone, replaced by clipped answers and forced smiles. He couldn't shake the memory of that day, of standing in front of his own class, marker in hand, watching the man with the mop solve what he couldn't. It had wounded something deep inside him. Then one morning, Principal Harris called him into his office. "Collins, I know it stung," he said evenly, "but Marcus didn't humiliate you. He inspired the kids. He showed them learning doesn't belong to one kind of person." Collins looked away. "He's not qualified," Harris leaned forward. "He's educated, more than you realize. And he's connecting with students in a way most of us haven't managed in years." Collins had no response. He just sat there, jaw tight, hands folded. Meanwhile, Marcus kept his head down. He didn't seek praise or titles. When Harris offered him a modest stipend to continue tutoring, he accepted only because it meant he could buy more notebooks and pencils for the kids. He started carrying a small binder everywhere, filled with handwritten notes, equations, and blank worksheets. During his breaks, he'd sit in the cafeteria's back corner scribbling quietly, preparing lessons that no one had asked him to create but that everyone wanted. Students began greeting him in the hall with bright voices. "Hey, Mr. Reed." Some even stopped to show him their graded tests, beaming when they saw higher scores. But one afternoon, a different kind of attention arrived. Principal Harris's phone rang. The voice on the other end was sharp, distant, and laced with concern. It was a parent. "I just have a question," the caller began. "Is it appropriate for a janitor to be tutoring students? Is he even certified? Has he been background checked for teaching?" Harris kept his tone calm. "He's a vetted district employee and he's not teaching. He's volunteering time to help students learn." But after he hung up, he sat for a long moment staring at the phone. He didn't tell Marcus about the call. He knew it would only discourage him. Still, the whispers grew louder. Not hateful, but hesitant. People didn't know how to categorize Marcus anymore. He didn't fit neatly into the role they'd written for him. He wasn't just the janitor now. He was something else, and in that uncertainty, unease started to bloom. Then one afternoon, as Marcus was in the middle of a tutoring session, Mr. Collins walked into the library. The students froze, unsure what to do. Marcus looked up, expression calm, a little surprised. Collins stood there for a moment, watching silently as Marcus explained integrals to a small group. The numbers rolled effortlessly off his tongue. His teaching was clear, elegant, almost artful. After a few minutes, Collins stepped forward. "Mind if I sit in?" Marcus studied him for a second, then gestured to the empty chair. "Long as you don't mind learning something." The students laughed softly, breaking the tension. For the first time, Collins smiled. not with mockery, but with humility. He sat, he listened, he even nodded. They didn't speak much that day, but something shifted. Pride met grace and for once didn't argue. Over the next few weeks, Collins started showing up more often. Sometimes he'd bring an extra problem to challenge the students. Other times he'd just watch quietly as Marcus guided them through each step. Slowly, the edge in his voice faded. The walls he'd built began to crumble. One evening, after the students left, Collins lingered by the door. "You know," he said finally, "I used to think teaching made me important. The classroom, the title, I thought that was where the power came from." Marcus wiped the chalkboard clean, listening. Collins went on quietly. "But watching you reminded me it's not about that. It's about showing up, making it matter." Marcus turned, his expression soft. "We all lose our way sometimes, no anger, no resentment, just understanding." For the first time, the two men smiled at each other, not as teacher and janitor, but as equals. But the story of Marcus Reed was no longer just about a man solving an equation. It was becoming something larger, something the entire town would soon hear about. The students were changing, the teachers were learning, and Marcus, without even trying, had sparked something far beyond numbers. And yet the real test, the one that would define everything, was still waiting ahead. Spring came slowly to Westbridge, and with it came change that no one could ignore. What began as a spark had turned into something much bigger. Every afternoon, the library buzzed with quiet energy. Dozens of students now filled the space, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They called it Reed's table now. Some even joked it was harder to get a seat there than in an honors class. Marcus still wore his janitor's uniform. He still mopped the floors, changed the lights, fixed leaky faucets. But when the day was done, he'd roll up his sleeves, wipe the chalk dust from his hands, and sit among the students as if he'd always belonged there. He taught them more than formulas. He taught them patience, confidence, how to fail without giving up. He showed them how numbers could make sense when life didn't. One student, Isaiah, had been failing algebra. Now he was solving equations without hesitation. Another, Mia, who once cried over math tests, was helping her younger cousins study on weekends, using notes she'd taken from Marcus's sessions. Word spread far beyond the school walls. A local journalist came by one afternoon to write about the janitor who turned a failing math crowd into believers. Cameras stayed away, but the story found its way into the local paper, then regional blogs, and before long, people across the state were talking about him. Marcus didn't want the attention. He told the reporter, "I'm not special. I'm just showing them what they already have inside." But not everyone liked the spotlight shining on him. A few people still questioned whether it was appropriate, whether he belonged in that role. The school board debated quietly behind closed doors. Papers were passed, calls were made. Some wanted to make his program official. Others said it was bending rules. Through it all, Marcus kept teaching, quietly, consistently. Then one afternoon, Principal Harris called him into his office again. There was a small stack of papers on the desk and a look of uncertainty in his eyes. "Marcus," he said, "the board met this morning. They've proposed turning your sessions into an elective next semester. Not for credit, just enrichment. They want to formalize what you're doing." Marcus listened, hands folded, expression calm. "That's kind," he said, "but I'm not sure I need that. The kids come because they want to, not because it's scheduled. If we turn it into a class, it might lose what makes it work." Harris nodded slowly. "Then we'll support you however you choose." And he did. That year, the school's culture shifted. Students stopped mocking subjects they didn't understand. They started asking questions. Teachers found new energy, inspired by the man who had no title yet taught with more heart than anyone. Even Collins changed. He began dropping by regularly, sometimes helping Marcus with the younger students. He wasn't the same man who once mocked him in front of the class. His sarcasm had softened into sincerity. He even joked, "I guess every teacher needs a teacher sometimes." Marcus laughed. "We all keep learning, Mr. Collins, that's the point." By the end of the semester, something incredible happened. At the school's annual student showcase, tucked between art exhibits and science fair projects, there was a booth labeled simply, "Reed's Table." On it were stacks of handwritten reflections from students. Each one told a story, Not about math, but about change. One read, "He taught me that I'm not bad at numbers. I just needed someone to believe I could understand them." Another said, "He made me want to learn again." Parents stopped to read, some with tears in their eyes. Teachers smiled quietly. Nobody saw a janitor anymore. They saw the man who reminded them why education mattered in the first place. Marcus didn't make a speech. He didn't stand under bright lights or take a bow. He just smiled, thanked the students, and quietly slipped away before the applause started. That night, back in his small apartment, he opened the old cardboard box one last time. The Purdue sweatshirt, the transcripts, the photo of him and his mother. The papers were yellowed now, edges curled, but they no longer felt like relics of a broken dream. They felt like proof that nothing truly good ever disappears. It just waits for the right time to be seen again. He placed everything back carefully, except one thing, the photo. He framed it and set it on his desk beside a stack of student thank you notes tied with string. He didn't need a title. He didn't need a classroom with his name on the door. He already had something better, proof that the smallest acts of quiet courage could ripple through an entire world. And the next morning, as he walked the familiar halls of Westbridge High, mop in hand, the students who passed didn't just nod politely anymore. They smiled. They waved. Some stopped to ask questions. Some just said thank you. The man they once walked past without a glance had become their greatest teacher. And Marcus Reed, the janitor who solved a calculus problem as a joke, had changed a school forever, without ever raising his voice, without seeking a spotlight, and without forgetting who he was. Because sometimes the most extraordinary minds don't stand at the front of the class. Sometimes they're just quietly cleaning the floors, waiting for a moment to remind the world what brilliance really looks like.